I got this call from this frantic guy who had just won a contract for $60,000 worth of toilet paper. And he's, hey, I need your help finding somebody to supply the toilet paper. Why? So you bid on this contract without having that? No, I just went on the Sam website and I took 10% off their price. Then I tried to buy it from Sam's and they were like, we can't give you $60,000 worth of toilet paper at the website. I just randomly bid on this because I thought I could win. He said, what's your advice? And I said, you need to call that contractor right now and say you're not accepting the contract.
Hey guys, Ricky here, and this week's episode of DoD Contract Academy is awesome. I've got Michael LeJeune on from RSM Federal, which you may have heard of. If you haven't, they do something similar to what we're doing. They're amazing at it, and I love bringing someone on the show that geeks out about federal contracting the same way that I do. And we talk about a lot of different things here. We talk about mistakes people have made, the best strategies for companies to use to actually go after contracts. We talk a little bit about the history of federal contracting. Michael's got an amazing backstory going from the Army to working for Tony Robbins, sales, public sector sales, finally culminating with RSM Federal. He's a best-selling author, and his books are amazing. I would say they're some of the best books on government contracting that you can get. So you want to look him up on Amazon for sure. Check his stuff out. And without further ado, here is my discussion with Michael. You guys put the best books out there. There's no question. I just pulled the one I could find. That was the Government Sales Manual.
That's the monster. Yeah.
That's the monster. There's another one, though, you guys wrote. You guys have several books, and I guess we could talk about that later. But just to let everyone know, you are definitely well respected by myself. And by the way, I was on your podcast. I don't think it was released yet, but so we've already had a great conversation.
Yeah, that podcast is coming. And thank you for that. I really appreciate that. And I love the fact you like the books. And I'm one of those people that I'm always learning from other people's stuff. And we definitely saw a gap in the market with some of the stuff that I saw initially where it was really generic information. And we just wanted to go a little bit deeper than what was out there. And so I think we've really done that with all four of our books. One of the ones that's actually behind me, Game Changers for Government Contractors out there. A lot of people have that. They have Insider's Guide to Winning Government Contracts with Josh. And then I have one coming out in the spring called I'm New to Government Contracting. Where do I start? And it's like a whole year's journey plus inside that book. And we actually have another one coming out next fall as well with a lot of our coaches. And so we really feel like that education gap is one of those things that really needs to be filled in this market because there's so much bad information out there, not just in my opinion. Again, I'm biased on this, so take it for what it is. There's a lot of bland stuff, but there's a lot of stuff that really is misleading. In my opinion, you and I were talking about that for the show as well, like that middleman strategy, where it's really being glamorized as this easy way to get in while you're working a 40, 60, 70 hours a week job, and how you can do it and make tens of thousands, if not millions of dollars in your underwear 2 hours a week. And that's just not the case, right?
No.
And so part of me is on a mission to make sure there's less misinformation out there than anything else.
Yeah, that is one thing that we absolutely agree on. And I see us saying some of the same things there as far as timeline is concerned, how long it actually takes. Even, look, is there a lot of money to be made selling to the government? Absolutely. That's why we have companies of all sizes that are selling to the government, right? There's a lot of money out there. It's not easy. It's not even easy from my viewpoint. I spent most of my time on the government acquisition side. And even as the guy that has funding and a requirement for me to put your company on contract, even with the way to do it, competition's over. Even then, it's hard and takes a long time. Trying to be honest with the audience about what it actually takes to go out there and win a contract is definitely, I also think that's missing. And so hopefully people can see this and get some takeaways. Not saying don't do it, just saying have an eyes open approach to this. And if somebody's telling you that I can get you on contract with the government in 30 days, it's not going to happen. I only know one time ever in my career that I get someone on contract in 30 days. But that was after there was no competition. There was funding in place. I had a contract vehicle. I had 30 people saying yes, and it was a priority in the organization. And that's not something you're just going to walk into.
Yeah.
So
I only know one company that has won their first contract within 6 months, and it was a multi-million dollar. It was a $40 million contract.
Oh, wow.
And that's the only company I've ever met that's done that. And it took them 10 years to win their second.
Wow.
You
Wow.
know, it was a complete fluke where
Yep.
they had a very unique solution with a
Mhm.
very unique problem at a time where the government needed it extremely desperately. And it just all it was the perfect storm that you never see, and they won it, and they go out and buy houses and cars because, "Yeah, man, this is awesome. We're gonna be a
Yeah,
billion-dollar company."
sure. War
And then yeah,
dogs.
and then yeah, and then they can't win a contract for 10 years. They're completely mystified
Oh,
because
no.
they spend the next 3 to 5 years thinking, "We won that one doing it this way. Why can't we just win the next?" So
So
they're
they
repeating those mistakes over and over and over again before they
yeah.
finally wake up and realize we've gotta change the way we do it. Then they've gotta learn a new way to do it.
Yep.
And yeah, it was just it's
Build
one
a
of those
sales
stories.
team.
Yeah, it just blows
Yeah.
me away every time I hear their story. And most people think it is like war dogs. People ask me that all the time. Could I just get on the website and just bid all day? You
Mhm.
can,
Yeah.
but if you don't know even like your vendors or things like that, I've had people come up to me. This is actually when Josh and I merged our companies about 10 years ago. I got this call from this frantic guy who had just won a contract. It was for $60,000 worth of toilet paper. And he's, "Hey, I need your help finding somebody to supply the toilet paper." "Why so you bid on this contract without having that?" "No, I just went on the SAM website." Like, this is not sam.gov,
That
but
was fed, yeah.
Sam's the grocery store type. "I went on the
uh
wholesale website and I took 10% off their price. Then I tried to buy it from Sam's and they were like, 'We can't give you $60,000 worth of toilet paper off the website.'" Right? "We're not gonna give you a discount." And he was scrambling because
uh
he's like, "I don't know anything about toilet paper. I just randomly bid on this because I thought I could win because it was a I think it was a like a minority-owned contract." He was like, "I checked the box there, I
Yeah.
checked the box here, and I just bid lower than everybody else." I'm like, "Wow, we got some problems here."
Yeah.
And but yeah, people do that.
And you can not recover from that very easily once you there is I don't want to get into it, but there is a way that the government can basically identify you as a company that hasn't performed the work that you're supposed to
Yeah.
perform, and that's going to stick with you. Very hard to get that removed or get
Yeah.
past.
Yeah, and in his situation, he said, What's your advice?" And I said, "You need to call that contractor right now and say you're not accepting the contract
Yeah,
because you're in a world of trouble
yeah.
because you don't know what you're doing." And yeah,
It's easy to get the wrong idea. Yeah, I know so everyone's probably listening to us just chit chat back and forth. But I will say that I did have a client when you're talking about within 6 months. My caveat to that is, and so it was one of my first clients, so I remember it really well. But they won a SBIR contract, and they were on in 4 months, but that's a different process. It's a little bit
yeah,
faster, and again, they had the right tech for the time and managed to get on there. But yeah, no, big picture, yeah, you're looking at probably a year more in some cases, 18 months. Great. One thing I wanted to talk to you about, because like I'm on your website and can we do just a little bit of your background just in case people haven't
sure.
read your books? And by the way, I like your website and you do a lot. And I want to go through some of the points that you have there about family and things that I resonate with, but maybe a little bit on your background because you've also served in the
Sure.
military and obviously you've had this great career.
Yeah, yeah. So I got into the military kind of haphazardly back in the late or mid 90s, where I grew up in Louisiana. There's only a couple of job opportunities, and one of those was welfare. And I really didn't want any part of that.
Yes.
So I joined the military, went in the army, did 4 years, and I just happened to luck out where I was at Fort Hood. We were doing the Force 21 program. And what was I surrounded by? Government contractors.
Yeah.
Literally everyone around me there was more government contractors some days than there were soldiers. And what I started seeing was my friends transitioning from uniform over to civilian. So they literally just went from making their $25,000, $30,000 to $75,000 just
Right.
instantly because they had been working in the programs. And so I thought that was attractive. And so
Mhm.
what did I do? When I got out of the army, I became a government contractor. I
Okay.
did that for a couple of years in an engineering capacity. Really just wanted to focus on being a software engineer. That's what my degree is in.
Hmm.
And one day I realized I was just like the military, there wasn't uh, anywhere for me to advance.
Hmm.
Like I was at the ceiling. And so I decided to leave and go to another company. And my boss, who was a colonel from the army that I'd worked with, was like, "Why don't you try sales?" So he gets me involved in sales. And it wasn't long before I was completely converted to the dark side. I was
Ah,
like, this is so much better. But I was different because I was a customer guy and I knew the product. So
yep,
I never really sold anything, but I became the number one sales guy really fast.
sure.
That's where I met Josh Frank. He's one of the first sales guys that I hired when I took over sales for that company. And so
Okay.
our relationship goes back 20 something years.
Wow.
So we've been working with each other that long. We did that for a while. Then we went our separate ways. I got in the commercial market. I worked for Tony Robbins and his company in the business division for a while.
Oh,
I
wow.
had a coaching franchise on the commercial side. So I've done coaching at every level on the commercial side that you can imagine. And then about a decade ago, Josh and I reconnected. And he was like, "Hey, what are you doing? Have you thought about getting back in government?" I'm like, no, I don't want any part of that. And the
Yeah.
more I thought about it, I love the niche and,
Mhm.
just being a soldier, it's like love supporting those people, whether it's in uniform or on the government side that are running those missions. And so joined back up with him and became a government SME and just went back to work and learning all this stuff. Cause when I got into sales, I didn't understand government. I didn't understand sales. I didn't understand acquisition. I didn't have any of that. So we didn't have all the resources that you have today. There were
Yeah.
no books written on this stuff. There was no Amazon. So
Yeah.
you weren't going to go and buy a book on this subject because there just wasn't any. And
Mhm.
so we learned it all the hard way, documented all that stuff. And then based on that, we built what is now Federal Access. So that's our coaching and training platform. We've got hundreds of documents and templates and training videos and a community and all that kind of stuff in there where we teach this stuff to people at different levels. And I will say there's three main levels that I see
Mhm.
as a government contractor. When you're new, whether it's new to government contracting or new to business, there's this learning curve of going from 0 to 7 figures, and there's all the challenges that are in there. Then there's a
Right.
different set of learning curves going from 7 to 8 figures, and then there's a different set of learning curves going from 8 to 9 plus figures. And being able to identify what those things are and how to implement those to stair step your way through that is really where we've tried to focus with folks over the years so that there's just a natural progression from each level to the next.
Yeah. No, that's really important. And I think that even though we talked a little bit about maybe some of the misinformation that's out there, even with that, if you compare the government contracting space to just regular sales and marketing, it is still a very small amount of people that are telling you anything about it. There's such a need for real information for people that actually understand the process to help them. And especially when you look at the amount of spending that the government is involved in each year.
Yeah.
And we're still year over year, we're seeing a decline in the number of small businesses selling to the government, but we still have the same requirement. The government still has to put roughly 23%, depends on the agency, but of contracts on small businesses. Fewer and fewer of these small businesses are getting those contracts every year. And it's mainly process. They don't understand the process or they don't understand the opportunity. And
Yeah.
you made some good points too about scaling and getting past the 7-figure mark and what it takes. And I would imagine you coach people on building a sales team and a pipeline and all of that and how to hire people. And by the way, one thing that one thing that did resonate with me when you brought it up was you, after the military, when working for that company, transitioned into sales, became the number one sales rep without knowing anything really about the government or sales. But you did have relationships with people in the government. And you understood that product very well. And I think that when I talk to people about hiring military veterans, for instance, really, and I don't know if you were selling to the military or not, but it just goes to show that you can take somebody that doesn't have an acquisitions background, but has a network, speaks the military language. Those, in a lot of times, they come with security clearances too, especially if you
Yeah.
hire like a
I did.
reservist or something. Yeah, they are overlooked, and they end up being sometimes the best salespeople that you could actually bring in because of those reasons. And then you arm them with information, and they become killers in a different way.
Absolutely. Yeah. When people are talking to me about who should I hire to do BD for me, one of the first things I always say is, especially if they're a product or software company,
Mhm.
I'll say, "Do you have an engineer?" And that always brings up red flags right there. But
Yep.
I'll say, "Do you have an engineer that really understands the product, like at a deep level? He's really good at customer service and can have even a halfway decent conversation with people."
Yeah.
Because that was me. I
Sure.
understood the product really well. And I was on our support desk for 2.5 years.
Yeah. So you're the guy.
What I learned on the support desk was every problem that every customer had, everything they hated about our software, everything they wanted on their wish list but couldn't get their hands on. And
Hmm.
I got to meet every one of those people. I would not have been the number one salesperson had I not spent 2.5 years getting to know all of our customers on a first name basis. When
Yeah.
I flipped the switch, I was able to call people and go, "Hey, Bob. Hey, Ricky. Hey, Susan. Hey, Jan. You
Hmm.
know, I'm on this side now. Remember that wish list you had of stuff that you couldn't get done? I can get it done now."
Nice.
Because like we had all this power on the sales team to be like, I'm going to go to the developers and say, you're going to do this
Yep.
because it's going to net us $4 million.
Right.
Where on the service side, I'd be like, well, would you do this? Because it'll make them keep renewing their contract and they won't be so mad and I won't have to take their calls. They didn't care.
Right. Of
But
course.
but on the sales team, I could just, "Hey, VP of sales, hey, why don't you rain hell down on the development team to make this happen?" And it would
Yeah.
happen.
Oh,
And
it's awesome.
so that's why that was going. It was all about the relationships I'd built for years and years. And to your point about the base shrinking, we did a podcast, and Josh and I,
Hmm.
several months ago. I don't remember what it was called. I think it was the review of the DoD's small business plan,
Hmm.
but I don't remember the exact title. But you can look that one up. And one of the things we noted in the plan that is mind-boggling is the disconnect between the government and even their own people
Oh,
on the contracting officers on saying we have shrunk the industrial base by 50%. It's shrunk by 50%. And that's even with all the new people coming in. And when you look through their small business plan, you're like, so your goal is now to increase it again, but when I look through the plan, you don't have enough things in there that are going to encourage that. In fact, there's a lot of things in your plan that are going to discourage people from joining this unless they have all this training and other stuff. So it's interesting to see that disconnect and we'll see if they fix it. But we've been pushing back on them saying, hey, if you want to see this grow again, you've got to make some changes because
yeah.
it's not necessarily small business friendly and it's getting less small business friendly in some aspects when you look
Oh,
at like CMMC or other different
FedRAMP
things
and
and yeah, all that kind of stuff.
yeah.
And what they're doing is actually building a business model for third parties to come in and charge money to make them compliant just to do business with the government,
Oh,
not
yeah.
even to win a contract. So there's some interesting things going on that we're pushing for. I know you've got the National Veterans Small Business Coalition. They're
Hmm.
really big advocates pushing for different change to make those kind of things happen as well.
Yeah.
Because we do need some advocates that will talk to the government and say, hey, the reason this is not the way you want, you're not hitting your goals, is because you've made it too difficult.
What are some of the examples, or maybe one example that comes into mind that you think needs to be changed?
I think one of the things that has been a challenge just with COVID, and this is just the first thing that popped in my head,
Yeah.
is they don't have a good mechanism for economic price adjustments. And given where we are right now, where things are so out of control, there's a lot of people that aren't going to rebid on a contract because they're like, we're losing money.
Yeah.
We've been begging for a price adjustment because this or that is now 4,000% what it was in 2020
Yeah.
or 2021, and we can't sustain this. And so people are walking away from contracts because they'll say, "Hey, we read in the FAR that we can request this," and they're like, denied."
Yep.
It just flat out. So you're just going to deny it,
Yeah.
and so having some mechanisms in there for that. One of the things that we've seen is the NVSBC, great group of folks. Point to them again here. They really lobbied for the increase on the veterans side, where
Mhm.
that number's always been around 3% in the current NDAA that should be signed, maybe even before this podcast comes out. It's going to go to 5%.
Oh, good.
For veterans, and
That's
so
awesome.
more spending requirements there. Because I've always told people, I'm like, when you look at your veteran status, unless you're selling to the VA,
Exactly.
a lot of people don't really care.
No.
Even as a veteran, so there is a massive abyss between being a veteran-owned company and a service-disabled veteran. It's like just the VOB status, I hate to say this, but it's worthless in most situations. Like, I
Yeah.
don't even know of a solicitation that's gonna come out as just VOB.
Yeah.
It's gonna come out SD, and so you worked hard to get this, and it feels
And then you don't
worthless.
even get it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it feels worthless. So there's some things like that. And then when you look at, this is my biggest pet peeve, is the communication between industry and government,
Hmm.
where there's so much pushback on whether it's contracting officers, PMs, you name it, where they're like, we can't talk to you. I'm like, have you read anything that says there's supposed to be a partnership between us on this?
Hmm.
You're supposed to be doing pre-solicitation discussions and RFIs
Yes.
and different things, and you've got contracting officers who are not only not doing any of that, they're putting out stuff on Friday and it's due in 3 days.
Oh yeah. And sometimes that's intentional,
Yeah, and
you
it's a
know?
200-page proposal,
Yeah.
and or they're putting it out the day before Christmas, things like that. So there's all these little things, but the communication one is the big one where government is so standoff, but they also, to me, I feel like there's not enough of them, right? On the contracting officer side, and I've been told, "Hey, that's not gonna change, and you should just suck it up." Like, we're making all these changes in other areas. Why don't we hire more contracting officers? Because 'Cause we're like half the contracting officers we used to have,
Yeah.
maybe less, and there's a reason that a contracting officer has 250 emails in their inbox every day and can't respond,
Yeah.
because there's not
It's
enough of them. So, there's some things like that, and again, that pushback on communication where if we made some changes and they don't have to be difficult. They're not even have to be financial. There's simple things that we could change that would allow small business to get in and have a learning curve, or have less of a learning curve. Because that's the other thing is, I don't think there's enough high level resources for people out there, which it's job security for folks like you and me. But like when I look at what the resources are, they are also overworked. They're very entry level, and
mhm.
it's not the programs.
When you
It's
say
the
resources, do you mean like the P-tax and the
yeah.
small business offices? Yeah.
You look at those folks, and they are overtaxed with what they have to do. They're juggling 100 clients or more,
Yep.
and I couldn't juggle 100 clients. Man, I
Mm-mm.
feel for them. And so, if somebody needs to go deep on something because they need help, they just don't have the resources to help them.
Yeah.
They've got to send them somewhere else. And I think there's more partnerships between us where you see the DoD or certain organizations where they're like, hey, let's pull this in, which where does that ever work? Let's pull this in and let's do it ourselves without industry.
Never
That's
works out.
yeah, that's probably one of my biggest pet peeves at conferences too,
Yeah.
where I've seen a lot of times where at conferences, you'll see a situation where
Hey guys, just quickly wanted to tell you about a new release we have. So we have the government contract planner that just came out on Amazon. Guys, I have been using like black notebooks like this. I have probably 100 of these right next to me that I divide into leads, meetings, and pipeline. And I give them to my clients. I set this system up so when we're selling to the government, we know exactly what to do. And it just came out on Amazon. Go check it out. This is going to walk you through how to find leads that can actually turn into government contracts, and then doing the most important thing that you can with them, which is turn each lead into a meeting. I don't even put a lead into a pipeline unless I could turn it into a meeting. So if you have a sales team, if you're doing it yourself, this is going to walk you step by step. This is where you go to find them. This is where you can record them. So just like a regular planner or journal, you can put all the entries in there. And the thing about this is it has specific blocks that are just for government contracting. It has the questions you want to ask when you set up those meetings that are going to tell you if this is a real lead, if this is a lead that can turn into a contract for your company, and when can it. So it's really important. Go check it out on Amazon. It's the government contract planner. Now back to the podcast.
they're like, well, we're not letting industry speak. We're only letting government speak. Or we're going to do a panel and you've got to have 6 of you on stage and you can barely get an introduction in, and the people aren't going
Yeah.
to learn anything, right? So I just think there needs to be a better relationship between industry and government, because we have all the knowledge and the training and the resources, and it's right there. So those are, yeah, I could get on a soapbox on that one all day. So
No,
I'll just have to shut that one down.
no, I think that's great. And I just pulled this when you were talking. It made me think, I don't know if you've ever seen this one. It's called The History of Government Contracting. It's a
Nice.
great one to put you to sleep if you're not interested in selling to the government.
Yeah.
But when you read through it, you just realize that since the Revolutionary War, there has been this endless cycle of government puts companies on contract, and some contractor, like 1%, does something nefarious. The same thing. Some government dude lines his pockets, and then politicians that don't even understand how they were put on contract, they make regulations and policies,
Right.
which make it harder to put people on contract, which provide oversight, which burden people that does a lot of things that aren't good, some that are. But then what we have is now we go to war again 10, 20 years later. And now we realize we can't put companies on contract fast enough to make bullets, do whatever we
Right.
need to.
Right.
So they have to deregulate some of that. And then the same thing happens. So then even more policy and regulations are made after, again, the nefarious, the 1% do something wrong. And this has been happening over and
Forever.
over again until like in the 80s, there were over 50,000 pages of policies and regulations that contracting officers and program managers had to sort through just to put a company on contract. But yeah, so now you've got this insane system to put companies on contract, which, a lot of it was put in place for good reason. Look, what do they say? The path to hell was paved with good intentions. We try to focus on, hey, because there's a lot. No one's going to go step in and try to read 50,000 pages of contracting stuff. And you don't have to,
That's
right?
right.
If you know how to, if you're selling, you pick something, bookkeeping services or something, just understand how the government buys bookkeeping services, and we can be a lot more focused there.
Yeah. And the good news is there are people like you and I who are going to pick up the history of government contracting, and we're
R-
actually going to read through it.
Right.
And we're going to read through the NDAA, which could be 2,000 pages, it could be 4,000 pages, and pick out the things that are of noteworthy, to talk to our clients about, talk to
Yeah.
the market about, educate them on those things. So there's a lot of people out here with really good intentions, like the two of us, who are trying to make sure the market knows here's what's going on. Here's the pitfalls. But on the other side of the pitfalls, there's all this good stuff.
Yeah.
You need to avoid the pitfalls and focus on the fundamentals. I've never seen a business so focused on just the fundamentals. If you can master the fundamental, you don't even have to master them, because I see people all the time that I'm like, are you kidding me? This
Mhm.
person's making 10, 20, 30, $50 million in this business, and they're a complete nightmare behind the scenes. So you don't even have to master them. But
Yeah.
if you're focused on the fundamentals,
Mhm.
filling your pipeline, building relationships, actually delivering on the promise that you said you were going to deliver on. Like,
Yep.
those are some really simple things. And if you can just focus on that, you don't have to spend 20 hours a week in Bloomberg or GovWin or any of those software solutions. They all have their place,
Sure.
but it's the fundamentals.
It's
And
relationships.
yeah,
It's
those
and yeah.
simple things. And that's the difference in this. But it's, on the one hand, this is a very low tech, just relationship driven, simple business. And that's what I love.
Yeah.
It doesn't require somebody with these insane skills. If you have those skills, sometimes it can be a help, sometimes it can be a burden. But it's the fundamentals that make it easy, that allow for so many people to play in the market.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right, because you do have, and I think I've read it in your book also, just from being here. You get a lot of people that they watch War Dogs, or they hear about government contracting, and so they register and they start writing proposals. And it's really, I'm not saying you can't win a contract that way, but it's very difficult to just come in last minute. And 'cause I knew every time what company I wanted to hire. I didn't always get to hire who I wanted to, but I knew every time because they were in my office. I was talking to them. You're not even going to put a proposal out there unless you are talking with people. You shouldn't be putting a proposal out there if you're, meaning the government shouldn't, unless they're talking with industry, small and large businesses that can actually do the work, that can inform the process. There is a fair way of going through a competitive solicitation, right? Again, I did not always get to hire who I wanted to, but the government office is probably developing a relationship with someone and also learning, can they set it aside for a veteran-owned small business? Can they include your certifications or your special technology if that gets included, you're really setting yourself up to be more competitive when that solicitation comes out.
You bring up a really good point, and as a podcast host, I feel like I have the urge to switch gears and ask you.
Ah,
And because I think I think I know your answer on this, but people think that the only companies in industry that you're talking to when you're on the contracting officer side are the big boys, as they say. It's the billion-dollar companies. And from my experience, that's not the case. It's the people that separate themselves from the crowd, where you've
yeah,
got a huge group of people that all look and sound the same, and they all sound like they're uneducated about the market, because they are. They're
yep,
clueless and they're stumbling through. But you can spot that a mile away, like, oh, they don't know who they want to be when they grow up. But then
absolutely.
when somebody comes along and you're like, man, this doesn't sound or look or feel like everybody else. And
Hmm.
I want to talk to them. Right. So
Yeah.
being able to separate yourself, and those are the people you talk to, regardless of the size.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Like, one of my jobs was just talking with companies. And if a company came into my office and cybersecurity companies were notorious for this and would hand me either go through their slide deck or a CAPE statement or something, and they do everything, right?
Yeah.
There's 1,000 things on there. I don't even know where to start with them. And I
Right.
almost don't care. If they came in and said, for instance, I had an insider threat project I was working on originally when I first switched from flying. And I remember one company came in and they knew what we were working on. And okay, Rick, we know that you're working on this. We do one thing and we protect data at rest. And this is how we do it. And now, holy crap. Now that's a company and here's some proof in the pudding. Yeah, that was something that we could resonate with and have further conversations with. And then just with the big companies, I worked in tech and a lot of the bigger weapon systems, but just so people listening know, those big companies are extremely difficult to work with for the government. They're like working with other government organizations. And there are a lot of pushes like open mission systems to ensure that small companies, small tech companies, which usually have the innovative solutions, and that's why they get bought by the big companies a lot. We wanted to make sure they could design to these bigger weapon systems. That's a kind of a side note, but it's a pet peeve of mine, like the whole big company thing. There's a place for them, but that is not a fast process or necessarily the best process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know what it was about the pandemic that had cybersecurity companies coming out of the woodwork that also did janitorial. I was like, what in the world is going on that you have that as two of your core competencies on your website, on your Cape State? Like it's
Oh,
literally on the Cape State. I like, so you're going to come in here and work on all our routers and all our stuff. And when you're done, you're going to clean the building. Like, I don't,
unbelievable.
I get, hey, look, I'm an entrepreneur. I get being an entrepreneur. But when that company comes in, you're like, do I trust it? Is the cyber guy a janitor who's doing cyber, or is he a cyber guy who's doing
Yeah,
janitorial work? Is
exactly.
it 2 different
Exactly.
guys? I don't know what's going on there, but that just leaves a really weird taste in your mouth. We're like, I don't know if these guys can do this. It seems like
Yeah.
they're maybe moonlighting or and it just rubs people the wrong way.
Yeah. Again, and I was just talking about everything with cyber, but if you start, and I've seen that too, but it becomes almost comical. And I think I get being a company because me and you could probably do a lot of different things. So if you don't know anything about marketing or sales and you're just like, hey, they need to know that we can do all of these things. I think and this is where like having great sales executives or a good consultant or a good coach or something comes into play. It's just, hey, know what they need and focus on that. You might do these other things. I would recommend spinning off another business that does janitorial and separating it. But
Talking about that ever again.
oh, that is funny. That
Yeah.
is funny.
Well, and I think part of it comes from just the basic entrepreneurial missteps of any type of company, regardless of whether it's government or commercial, where you don't want to miss out. You don't want a
Yeah.
customer to think we can't do the job. So you want to throw everything at them. But I always go back to, let's say, God forbid, you had a serious brain issue and you needed surgery. You would go see a brain surgeon. You wouldn't want that to go see a guy who's, I do that, but I
Right.
also
Yeah. I do
work
feet.
on feet. Yeah, work on feet. And on the side, do a little bit of janitorial work. Who are you going to talk to? You're not even going to have a conversation with that company,
Yeah.
right? You're going to go to the people that are like, oh, he works in a practice that specializes on traumatic brain issues or whatever. And you're going to get a specialist. And that's what people don't understand is by throwing the kitchen sink at everybody, you're
Hmm.
actually excluding yourself instead of having them even take you seriously. Where
Yeah.
my approach is always go in with your flagship, sell your flagship, do a good job delivering your flagship, and do a capabilities brief 30, 60, 90 days later and say, hey, Rick, we've been doing some really good work for you. And I know you know about our cybersecurity solution, but did you also know about our custom software development or our this, that, and the other that
Right.
all go back to cyber, right? We can do those things. And while we've been here, we've spotted 4 areas that we think we could help with, right?
Yep.
That's a very different conversation. And you don't have to get rid of all those things you do. They just have a place. You need to put them in a right order, like that a customer journey, right? There's
Hmm.
always going to be an easy entry point to bring somebody into your company. Identify that, and that's the one thing you do. Like
Yep.
that company you just mentioned, protecting data at rest. I actually have a company that does very similar stuff.
Okay.
But when and it was the same conversation. I'm like,
Mm.
"What do you do? What's
Right.
the one thing you do?" And it was a lengthy discussion because they had 19 bullet points on their
Yeah.
core competencies. And they're like, "But what we really do is this. This is what we do.
This is what
Okay, then this is what we sell."
they came and saw me.
There you go.
Oh, that is funny, man. So it's funny because we jumped into this. I'm like, hey, let's talk about branding, and we're 42 minutes in, and we haven't
Never talked about Brandy.
never talked about branding. But let's take a couple minutes just to talk about it because I get companies talking about marketing when they reach out. I also get a lot of businesses that hired a marketing firm, that someone that said, "Hey, we're going to market you to the government for sales." I do think there's a place for marketing. There clearly is a place for marketing, place for branding. I think it's a lot different than B2B or B2C. Maybe you
Yeah.
could touch on what you think the place is. What are the benefits? What are you doing?
Yeah. So when you think about branding, most people think about a logo and a color scheme. That's
Yeah.
branding.
Mhm.
And hey, we're going to put some stuff out there, some messaging out there. And that's part of your brand. But ultimately, your brand is what people think about when they
Mhm.
think of you. What are they thinking about? And there's a lot of different components of my brand. One of the things about my brand is how approachable I am. They're like, "Oh, you're always in a ball cap and maybe a hoodie or whatever." You're like, "You just seem so approachable." And then they meet me somewhere and they're like, "You're just like you were on the videos. It's the same guy. It's not a different guy." And part of my brand. And you're so knowledgeable, part of my brand. There's a lot of different things, but ultimately, like with our brand, it's mastering the art and science of government sales.
Mhm.
That's your thing. It's government sales. How do you master those things? And we've built that over a long period of time. Your brand starts in an initial 30 seconds, but it takes years to establish a really good brand in the market where you're known for this thing that you do, this outcome that you provide. And a lot of your brand is built on delivering to customers. As you're delivering to customers, that's how your brand is built
Mm.
and how you're talking to people. Because people think it's all about the marketing. It's that billboard we get just outside the government conference or, sponsoring the ice cream break or whatever. That's how we build our brand. It's setting up a booth somewhere. And
Right.
those are all things where people get to see your brand. You
Mhm.
build your brand by doing the work. And
Yeah.
a big part of that is communicating to the market. So I personally believe there should be at least one, if not multiple people in your company that are evangelists of the brand
Mhm.
and they are thought leaders for your industry. That's what Josh and I are in this space.
Mhm.
And when we work with coaches that are on our team, hey, you need to be a thought leader in your specific area. And if you're a thought leader, guess what you have to do? You have to share your thoughts
Mhm.
and you need to use a platform because you can't call yourself a thought leader if you don't share your thoughts.
Sure.
Like, you're just not a thought leader, right? Even if you have one of the brightest minds in this, you've gotta share them. And so we use a handful of platforms, and those platforms help communicate the brand to the market. There's calls to action in a lot of them, but it's the biggest point is getting people to spend time with our brand.
Mhm.
Because if you go back to, I think it was Brian Tracy that came up with he probably didn't come up with this, but the whole know and trust concept, people can know you're there fairly quickly. They
Mhm.
can like you in one conversation. It takes somewhere between 7 and 10 hours usually for them to trust you.
Yeah, that's true.
It's spending time with your brand. And so for us, the podcast is a way for them to spend time with our brand where they can hear us and get to know us really well. And I'm in your ear while you're going to work or riding the metro or on a
Right.
plane or whatever. They can spend time with our brand. And you can use social media for that as well. YouTube, LinkedIn. When people ask me, I'm like, you need to be hands down in LinkedIn no matter what.
Yeah.
If you exclude everything else, being on LinkedIn and connecting with people is one of the big ones. So podcast, social media, the next one here, we've been talking about it the whole time, is our
Mhm.
books. People
Yeah.
know us because of our books. We sell thousands of books every year, thousands of books.
Yeah.
And it's because we looked at the books and said, we're going to do something different. We're going to be known for providing more than just high level stuff in our books. We're
Mhm.
actionable things. Like when people pick up Game Changers and show it to me, it's got like the little yellow stickies all over
Yeah.
that book. And so we want to be known for the level of information we provide. So books is another one. And by the way, there's never been an easier time to write a book. You don't
Oh,
need a professional editor, all this kind of stuff. There's so much built into the Amazon platform that'll do it for you.
yep.
And you get more through the Amazon platform than a traditional publishing deal.
Yeah.
So
You
only
actually recommended that to me, I think, on our last
yeah,
conversation. It might have been after the podcast,
yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah. So I
So
took your advice and I hit publish. It hasn't come out yet, but I think it
yeah,
takes 72 hours.
there
Yeah.
you go. So those are just some of the simple ones. The last one that I'll say, which if you did it in reverse order is fine too, is the public speaking aspect of it.
Yeah.
All these conferences do have options for speaking. Some of them, like I said, my pet peeve earlier, where they're trying to push a lot towards these panels. But
Yeah.
even if you're on a panel, getting in front of a room of 30, 50, 100, 200 people, there's no better way to push your brand out there than being a qualified speaker on stage at a conference you respect, because you're
You're
going to
right.
have a line of 50 people come up and talk to you,
Oh,
and
yeah.
just networking and talking with them. So those are some ways to really promote and push your brand. But
Mhm.
again, I think going back to the beginning, you establish a brand by delivering on your promise, whatever that is. It's either a good brand or it's a bad. Think about McDonald's really pushes their brand on the children first, right? So they
Mhm.
can nurture that client base as it's growing. But as you get a little older, you're like, man, this food sucks.
Yeah.
Why are we coming back? And it's because we're addicted to the brand. It's really because a really good brand does two things. One, it causes people to make irrational decisions about their
Mhm.
purchasing. And the
Sure.
second one is that it creates inbound leads. And inbound leads are priceless.
Oh,
It,
especially from the government,
it's priceless.
especially from the government.
Yeah. And there's nothing like when a contractor calls up and says, "Hey, have you seen this solicitation yet? I want to make no, I haven't." And it's because we just hit send,
Yep.
but we want to make sure I just want to make sure you knew it was there.
Oh, yeah.
You
And
know,
it happens. That happens a lot.
it happens a lot. And it happens on us on stuff we're not even interested in, where
Yeah.
contracting officers will reach out to us and say, "Hey, we thought you guys would be perfect. So we wanted to make sure you knew about it." But imagine on an inbound lead where
Mhm.
somebody's been reading your book, listening to your stuff, and they get on the phone with you. You're a minor celebrity.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So talking about that works B2B or B2C also, right? I recognize
Yeah,
that just from what I'm
absolutely.
doing. If someone reaches out to me because they heard my podcast, they already want to work with us, right?
Yeah, it's a
The
done deal.
government,
It's on you to screw it up at that point.
yeah, exactly. And the government's the same way. So if I'm working with a company and now the Air Force office reached out to them because they saw their aviation software and in that, again, I think you're right. It's up to you to screw it up. A lot of times that type of thing isn't even, hey, did you see this solicitation that's out? It's, I can't even find anyone that does this except for your company. And that's a sole source contract right there. As long
Yeah.
as you have like you said, you got to deliver on the solution. So you got to have an excellent product or solution or service you deliver, but you can generate those. You can't just rely on all inbound, but you are going to get some of that,
Yeah.
but you got to have a
Dude,
presence.
yeah, those are great. And people think that, oh, it's so hard to win a sole source. It's difficult when you're sitting back doing nothing.
Sure.
But when you are promoting your brand and you're talking to the right people, you're responding to RFIs. I have two clients. This is two clients that a month and a half ago, within a span of about 30 days, those two clients won 11 contracts that were all sole source
Wow. That's
because
amazing.
they just been laying the groundwork. And
Were
it
they
took a
were
while.
they 8A or
They were both 8A,
okay.
but it wasn't like they had reached out, made one phone call, and it was done. It was RFIs and positioning they'd been doing for, in some cases, 12 months, some cases,
Yeah.
a year and a half. But they were selected for that. And that was for
Yep.
them just a bonus on top of everything else they were doing.
Sure.
And it was millions of dollars.
That-
And yeah,
that's excellent advice. It's excellent advice because it tells people start looking at RFIs and sources sought, things like that, right? Sometimes it gets labeled a sources sought. It's really just they want the information, right?
yeah,
But it's also don't just respond to the sources sought of the RFI, right? There's extra work that goes into that. Just as a
yeah,
side note, we just did with a client, and this happened really fast, but it was I think 10 days ago, 11 days ago. I responded for them. I didn't even respond to the source side. I just emailed the contracting officer and gave them a couple of bullets, right?
Yeah.
That turned into no, absolutely. And then it was last minute. And then, hey, can you fly out to Ukraine to do a demo of your tool? And we just got back. It was great. But that's the type of thing is it's not just reaching out. It's, hey, can I have set up a briefing? Can I tell you a little bit? And I don't know if that's going to turn into a contract or not. But if you're doing that type of relationship building, that usually shows a lot of benefit. And it creates, even if you don't win, you create relationships that could end up
Yeah.
helping win something later on.
Yeah. I was just talking to a client yesterday and he's been doing what you told me. And I reached out to every one of our past customers and it was about 15, 20 people. And one of them said, "Hey, are you available tomorrow for a meeting?" And they were about 3 hours away from each other. And they said, we will drive up to you. That's what the contracting officer said. There's
Yeah.
two of us. We're going to drive up to you. And by the way, they just started spilling their guts about, hey, we've been thinking about transitioning from this thing that you're supporting to this other thing.
Yeah.
And where there's some anxiety, there's some challenges, some fears that we have about this transition. And he's, what do I do about this? I'm like, eat it up first,
Yeah.
right? There's out of the 15 people you called, one of them said, let's have an in-depth discussion with you. We'll drive up to your office
Yeah.
and meet with you and have lunch and spend a day with you going through what we're going to be doing in our massive transition technology-wise over the next 5 years. I, one phone call.
Yeah, I think if anyone, you made about 100 great points during this conversation, but I think if anyone had one takeaway from this, for companies that are, and I see this all the time too, but for companies that have sold to the government, like for me, my perspective is that there is no easier way to sell to the government than to sell to your existing customer base. And I think your point that you're making too is that there are a lot of businesses out there that make a sale and kind of move on. Hey, let's go to the next sale. But especially if it's a service or a software license or something like that, where there's ongoing, I'm meeting with those people every month, at least reaching out by email and then setting up quarterly meetings or something. Just reaching out to them to make sure that your product or service is acceptable to them and is doing great will lead to, do you need more of it? Will lead to, hey, like you said earlier, here's our other offerings that we didn't talk about. Or, hey, do you know anyone? Was anybody else because guess what? Contracting officers hang out with other contracting officers, program managers hang out with other program managers. That it has to be and by the way, in a lot of cases, you're already on contract with them. So for them to buy more from you doesn't necessarily mean a solicitation. That could just be a delivery order on your current contract, depending on what you've got set up. It makes things a lot easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll leave you with two metrics on this. This has been a fairly standard metrics for the last 30 something years. And this is commercial, it's government, it's across the board. I
Mhm.
don't care what you sell. Somebody who's already bought from you, 27 times more likely to buy from you than somebody who's never heard of you.
That's
That's
interesting.
that's the first metric. The second one is when people look at their revenue, 68 to 75% of their revenue has come with a follow-up. So less than
Interesting.
30% of revenue comes from one shot, one kill. Less than 30% of revenue. So the
Wow.
majority of your revenue will come from multiple follow-ups.
Yeah. That's amazing. The 27 times more likely. That is, first of all, that's an interesting number, but yeah, that's absolutely true. Follow up and persistence, man. I'm telling you, you're right. Absolutely. Those are great takeaways. And I know we're coming here towards the end of the hour. We probably could have gone on for another hour here talking to people, but I know that everyone's going to love this episode and talking to you. Hey, how can they find you? What's coming up? Where's the best way to reach out?
Sure. The easiest way to get a hold of me is probably LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. So Michael LeJeune, go look at it, make sure it's the right Michael LeJeune. There's about 5 of us in the consulting world. I'm not the guy that does airplane stuff or HR or whatever. I do know those guys. There's one in LA, there's one in Houston. I'm the guy in East Tennessee. So that's
Yeah.
the easiest way to find me, Michael LeJeune in East Tennessee that does government contracting. And you can also find us on the website, federalaccess.com or rsmfederal.com. Either one of those has all the info there. What's coming up, we're going to be all over the country this year. I'm going to be at the 8A conference speaking at that one. I'm going to be at the NHOA conference in Hawaii. So if
Wow.
you need a good reason to spend some money to go to Hawaii
Ah,
on your government dime, I'll be speaking at that one. We always have the Vets Conference in May in Orlando.
mhm.
We've got the Hub Zone Conference will be in August again. And then I think we're going to do the VIB one in San Diego as well, probably. I'm also looking to do it at the Res in Las Vegas. So there's a handful of conferences I'll be around, and highly recommend you take the time and go visit some of these conferences.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. We'll put all of your contact in the meeting notes, or in the notes rather, at the end of the podcast. And it's also come out on YouTube. Thanks again, Michael, for coming on. This has been awesome. We're definitely going to have to do this again.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anytime.
All right, cheers.